All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. We have our best annual, our funnest episode in store. Jordan, any idea what today is?
It does. It feels like that mid-season holiday. Fun fact, it was the first episode I think I did with you guys.
That is right.
Yeah.
That was the very first one.
Yeah.
And you are referring to our best friend in the world, Mr. Bill Gardner from Gardner Designs and LogoLounge. What's up, Bill?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that Jordan remembers that far back. Yeah. All the way back. What was it? It was 2 years ago when I asked him if he cut himself in half, if there would be just a single ring for just 1 year of participation. Now he's got 2 rings.
Yeah. Beyond the sprout.
That is the best.
And I got to tell you, that's always the way to make friends, is to start a conversation by saying, have you ever cut your arm off and counted the rings? You know, because
I'm gonna remember that one, because dude, the fact that you remembered it was so good, right?
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Well, this only means one thing. Bill has been working year round, like you do all the time, and this is your 20th year doing this.
Yeah, like this is the only thing that I do, Nick. Come on.
No, you know what I mean. But
no, I've been working year round, all year. You know, it's amazing. He's got this retirement fund going that he can just live off of. Believe me, that's not the way it works.
In addition
Actually,
to running,
what does happen? Yeah, what does happen is in about February, I kind of wave goodbye. I tell my wife, I'm going to go work on the trend report. I'll see you in April.
April.
I vanish for a period of time.
That is incredible. And you take this on in addition to running Gardner and putting this thing together.
And LogoLounge.
Everything, right?
All of this stuff, all at once.
You're a multifaceted guy wearing a lot of hats for sure.
It works. It works.
It does. And I think it kind of puts it all together. Like, do you find like one thing gives you the credibility for the other and vice versa and all that? Because it all goes together so well.
Okay, you just figured out my secret sauce. Yeah. If I lose any one of these bricks, this whole thing tumbles down like a house of cards. It's just amazing. No, it really has been interesting from the perspective of, you're right. This is the 20th year of doing this. In 2003, Gordon Kay, the publisher of Graphic Design USA, said, Bill, would you write an article for us? And I said, I'm kind of seeing some commonalities amongst trends going on. And I wrote this thing having no idea that it was going to end up turning into this annual report that we ended up doing. But this thing has literally traveled me around the world. Now that the Ukraine and Russia are no longer friends, in the same year had me double speaking in Moscow and Kiev, doing the trend report over there. It has literally just taken me around the world and put me in front of so many incredibly cool and talented people in our industry.
Oh, I can only imagine, man, because it's like the one thing I love are the things like you, and I'd say like there's just a handful of companies that really do unify designers all over the world in a lot of ways. How else can we learn from each other but like things like LogoLounge, things like the book, and it's just such a great tool. I know Jordan and I refer to it all the time when we're discussing or sharing designs, on Slack or something. It's such a great spot to just either start or get that daily inspiration, and then to show it in the book to me is one of those just incredible capsules of the year, right?
I've got to share a little insight that I've got, because I love books, and books were what caused LogoLounge to happen. But it was almost the antithesis, because if you think about it, a book that you pick up off the shelf, that you buy at Amazon, maybe that content in that book was submitted, a year before that book came out. The chances are it had been sitting around for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So when you're looking for inspiration, you pick up that book, you literally are picking up history. Whereas if you are a LogoLounge member, and it's $100 a year and people can buy a membership. We'd love to have them, and you can submit, so on and so forth. But you're actually looking at content that's coming out in real time.
Yeah.
And I'm having this conversation with our design team, and I'm looking over and I realize that every one of our designers has their big monitor lifted up about 3 inches off their desk. with books. So I'm going, excellent. Glad that those books are causing good value for our design program here.
Literally
They're all lifting up the monitors.
Yeah, lifting up the design world.
That is exactly the line they should have used.
That is so great. But you're right, and I'm not the biggest book guy, but I'm a fan of books that are like resource books, the books that I can pull and get what I need really quick. And to me, I think there's not that many of them in our industry that they might be of a particular artist, and I love those ones too. But to have resource books, to me, those are those ones that just really, gosh, I don't know. It's like, it's like their go-tos, and that's what you guys have become to so many of the designers out there.
Hey,
even as like
thanks,
designer,
I appreciate it.
It's really fun and exciting. Like, oh, my work is like in a physical thing. Like so often it's like, oh, someone shared it on Instagram or it's in some trend list, but like, it's really cool to have it. Like it's in a book and it's on my shelf and I can pull it out, or like it made the cover or whatever that might be.
Jordan, you just lassoed the heart of this thing. You really did, because the number of designers that we have over the years speculated on, are we going to keep doing the book, or are we going to, because it sells great, and we have a lot of fun, but all this content's on LogoLounge. But I swear to you, we have people that get uproariously upset at even the thought of that, because when you have something that you've created that is in print, and of course we're designers, so we're accustomed to things in print, but that is in a book. You open that book up and you see that piece that you've done. And I swear there is a chill that runs up and down your spine. I have had grown individuals, and I'm not just talking about wusses like me, have tears in their eye when they see their work for the first time in a book. And it is not only that level of recognition that they have reached an attainment at this achievement level, but it is an inspiration for them to continue to try and achieve at that level. Yeah. And it's an ongoing, it's a goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's also show mom and dad, because it could be like, look, see, this graphic design thing worked out.
And of course, you're pointing at yours, and they go, oh, well, that one's a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is mine.
Oh, who's this designer?
Are there birds in here? Let's look at the birds. That's a dragon. Yes, mother, but look at mine. Look at mine.
I think you nailed it too. Yeah, that's what everyone talks about. I love seeing the day that everyone finds out, and then you see people throwing it up on Twitter or whatever, and you can see that passion as well. And I don't think there's a lot of that in our industry. A lot of times, that's like that one fun little, kind of like trophy. No pun intended, because your icon is a trophy. That's the coolest part.
Yeah, there you go.
So when we met last year, it was a very interesting conversation, because it was really the first time you had a pretty good capture of what the last 2 years had done to branding, to industries. And I remember that was the one where we really kind of like took a dive into that. Like, what really, you saw huge changes like very quickly, right? And I'm curious to know, what was your first observations when putting this new trend together? We're going to go through those in a sec, and we're going to have them here on the screen as well, so you can follow if you're watching our YouTube version of this. But what was those first observations that you saw for this?
So, and I swore to myself that I was not going to bring up the C word.
You don't have to.
In this interview. But if you think about the period of time during which those logos were submitted, it certainly, it ran through the last year. For those that don't know, the report is always built from everything that has been submitted to LogoLounge since the prior report. And that usually is about an end of February date. And it just so happened that this report coincided with the submissions that came in for book number 13, which we're getting ready to launch, I think, next month. It's going to be out. But that meant that we had 35,000 logos that had been submitted that I had to go through to try and find, to read the tea leaves on 35,000 logos. And not only that, but when we do this, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, we go back through Brand New and any number of other sites looking at every significant rebrand or branding that's gone on during the last year. So, I mean, there's a lot of content that you're scraping through, but that content was created over a really interesting period of time chronologically. From when we were kind of locked down to when we're locked out and to when we're, completely out. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I would love to be able to sit here and say, what really happened during that period of time? You know what that caused? I don't think it did much more than it gave us a little bit more free time to actually design.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people discovered during that period of time that companies had one of two options. They either said, I'm going to sit down and figure out what the hell is going on. Or they said, you know what? Everybody's sitting down to figure out what's going on. We're going to sprint like hell and get ahead of them. And fortunately, really good designers have clients that have courage, and they're the ones whose clients were sprinting and they were going, yep, let's go. Here we go. So amazing things happened during the last year.
I think we all, that was one of the main takeaways last year when we were all talking. We all saw that amongst small design studios, right? And the clients they had, clients fell into those two categories, like you just said. Either they were just like sprint ahead or stop and think. And you're just hoping you have those ones. And thankfully, I think they led the way. I was just waiting for, show me what to do, clients, right? At that time. It was really interesting. But this not only being the 20-year thing, I like that you, at the beginning of the report, talked a little bit about not just this last year, but the past 20 years of logo hunting and logo searching and all the stuff that you've done. You had some really good pointers there. What was your biggest takeaway when you looked at 20 years?
The thing that kind of embarrasses you a little bit is the fact that now I'm going to share a story on myself. I have had companies that I have designed multiple brands for, multiple logos for, because I started with them 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and they got to that point where we need to refresh the logo. And that's great that they came back to me, but there's always that point in time where you find yourself looping back around. And with the logos, I think that we found a couple of points in time where we kind of got, oh crap, we did that. We did that back in 2005.
Totally.
Or that did come back, didn't it? Yeah. You know what I mean, Jordan, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
So so it's a long enough period of time there. But the other just amazingly cool part about this, and anybody who's read the report or who has been to LogoLounge to look at the past 20 years of trend reports, and by the way, they're all out there on the free side. You can look at all 20 years of them. That's 3,000 some logos that we have, put in the reports in, 15 times 300 different categories, so it's a lot of logos.
Yeah.
But the cool thing that happens in there is it's kind of, you've heard people that say, if you're invested in the stock market, don't watch the stock, because on what it does on an hourly or a daily or even a weekly basis is not a reflection of what it is really doing. That you need to look at it over a period of time. And this is the same thing with the logos and the trends, is you've got to look at these things over a period of time. You can't say, oh, I just saw that logo come out today, so I guess this is a trend. No, it's a logo that came out today that may have been a trend, years ago, or it may be a future trend, but it's just a single piece of data. And when we look at 20 years, you're able to really see how they have reflected upon each other. So you can say, oh, that transitioned into this. Lines started getting thinner this year. And then the next year they were thinner. And the next year they were almost invisible. And then they got really fat. Well, okay, what happened? The pendulum swang, it's going, we're going. But that informs us so that we have a sense of where any one of these trends is going. You reach a saturation point and you back off. You find a void and you fill it. And, and you can tell these things by looking at the previous reports.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated with that sort of pendulum and when stuff does come back to swing, or, I'm getting old enough now where like things that were hip in like the 90s, I think is coming back around. It's been long enough now where like it feels vintage, the 90s, the retro. So now right? You need that 30-year window of things to be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Jordan, you're a good student. You picked up on that 30-year thing.
Yeah, that seems to be the window because, like, the 30-year.
That's just enough time. And I wonder if that's going to get smaller because it feels like we're going faster with things just because of technology and everything else, right? Like, does it go to 25 soon? Because it's so interesting. I always say, like, you walk through the mall, and there's so many opportunities of design and color and fonts and you name it, all the things we're a part of, and that will tell you what's kind of in right now. And in that 90s thing. But someone had to make a pretty clear effort to do that a long time ago, a year ago.
I had always heard the 30-year cycle, which we're all talking about, which is, for anybody who's not familiar, there's a rule of thumb that give it 30 years, it'll be back. If you want to know what's going to happen tomorrow, look at what was going on 29 years ago, and you pretty much got it. But that was somewhat based off the fact that as kids, we wanted that toy, that one thing, and we couldn't have it. Or we couldn't see that movie because we were too young, or we couldn't, and now we're old enough and we've got some funds and we can do it the right way. So it's 30 years later and, it's kind of like we're recreating our nostalgia, our past, so on and so forth. And that was always what I had heard. Now, I think there's two things that we're kind of conflating here. One is that trends can come back around in cycles, yes, and there are various cycles. We're going to even talk about one today that came back in a 60-year cycle. But at the same time, I think that you're going to find that window of change, whether it is cycling back or if it's just change, is becoming more and is becoming smaller and smaller. And that we tire of things more quickly. New things are introduced more quickly. The media and the form of delivery changes in such a way that we're able to do things that we hadn't been able to do a decade ago, or 2 decades ago, or a year ago.
Yeah.
And when you start to look at NFTs or augmented reality or virtual reality or the metaverse, start thinking about what you're going to be doing with what you're designing today when you start to shove those into an environment that is being skinned by, theoreticians and physicists as we speak. We don't know exactly what's going to go on, but you can pretty much guess if you walk in there and there's a logo you designed. Burger King, for instance, Burger King has this crisis going on because they're both digging into nostalgia and bringing it back, as you were just talking about. But at the same time, they literally just registered to have a trademark on their NFTs and to register what their food would look like in the metaverse. I swear. Wow. So it's kind of like you're going, okay, we're working both ends of this spectrum at the same time, aren't we? And when you get into the metaverse, what does that logo look like? If you walk up to it, can you turn it around? Does it have a backside? Does it have a butthole? Does it, can you bounce it? Does it squeak if you grab it? If I drop it, does it break? Or does it break into song? Sure. And there's all of this that we've got to start thinking about from a brand perspective. When we design a brand, if we're just talking about a logo, is it literally a logo, or is this something much more? Is it a larger picture? And it's all because of this change that's going on.
You're freaking me out now. Like all the things you got to consider. I know. I'm never going to design a successful logo again.
But it's true. It seems like the application always has really pushed design. I think it's just happening much quicker now. You look at even back in the day, where like printing presses and how we like went from actual like cut and paste to like doing things digitally, and now we're getting to this point where like it's just branding and design is at every touch point. Like you can't get away from it. It's so easy for anyone to like get into it. It's accessible to all these other peoples and creators. So like when you start to get into this metaverse, like that opens up like literally an entire new universe of like real estate where like things we can't do in physical form, we can really start to apply. So like, the logos have to be like, we need a black and white version, obviously our dimensional version for our, metaverse. And like, you have to like get into like this real estate of how
Yeah,
that
don't fool yourself. There are some well-funded companies that are sitting here kind of going, crap. Do we dive in
Yeah.
or not?
Yeah.
Do we fund this
Yeah.
or not? Because if we don't fund it and it takes off, we aren't there.
We're left
and if
in
we,
the dust.
And if we jump in and it doesn't take off, we are there. So,
Totally.
You know what's interesting? We did a quick tutorial the other day on showing some new 3D dimension that's happening in Illustrator. Yeah. And one thing they added was front and back treatments to it. And I thought of it, you nailed it by saying, like, what happens when you turn that logo around? What's on the back of it? And there we were doing that exact thing, turning the logo and giving it treatment to the back of it or to the top of it. And I'm sitting here going, like, isn't that incredible? That's exactly what you had in mind. Like, we have to start thinking of that logo in every context, at every angle, in every perspective, and every use.
When this came about is in the 1980s, there was a Super Bowl commercial that was done by Pepsi. And it was a little girl walking down the beach and her brother is sucking on a straw on a Pepsi bottle, like you would have a bottle at the beach. And, and he sucks so hard that his body pops inside of the bottle. And all of a sudden, this little Pepsi logo comes up, and it's the old one, the little ball that didn't have the butt crack showing.
Yeah.
But this little ball, and all of a sudden, the ball starts to spin. So you see the wave on the Pepsi logo undulating. Well, all of a sudden, the attorneys are going, wait a minute, this is a Pepsi logo from here. But from here, that's not the Pepsi logo. From there, that's not the Pepsi logo. From there, that's not. So they started to realize this idea of dimensionality and where does it come into registration? We've got a very arcane registration process, even worldwide, for being able to protect different visual assets. And it's not caught up with where we're going on this. They're still pushing paper in a world that doesn't have paper.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about like how that trademark facet comes into all this.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Because something as abstract as, let's say, those lines in the Pepsi logo, when it turns, it could infringe on something else, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because the idea of it being on the sphere and turning is kind of unique. Yep. So what angle you've got? These are like
reversing it. Like maybe it's a shape, and now it's like on someone else's. That's whoa.
It's crazy.
That's enough to make us all go crazy.
Okay, so let's not.
Let's get into 2022.
I'm gonna leave it with that. The brotherhood or sisterhood or fraternity or whatever it is among designers, all of us, we are moving into a period of time where there is going to be a lot of flux, and that whatever we do, a logo is no more than a representation of some quantity of information, right?
Yeah.
Or feelings or how you're engendered, and that there are going to be different ways to deal with that. And it may be a sound. It already is, think about the one note gong for Taco Bell or the one note gong for starting a Mac. We know them. Think about the smell of a car that you get into that is uniquely that car, or think about, all of these things are representational of those brands. So are they a logo? Could be,
more.
So as we start looking at these logo reports, just keep in mind that really what our business is, it's not drawing a picture so much. That's part of it. But more importantly for our clients, what they want is they want something that can be the husk that their brand belongs in. So that people recognize that husk. So
I think you just turned it into a fun challenge now. That's what you're here for, Bill. First you're scaring me. Now I'm like, yes, I think we're up for the challenge on something.
We're back to the husk.
Yes, exactly. There's the new T-shirt for next year. One thing I saw in your first beginnings of 2022 and your findings, you said Wordmarks and typography are playing a much more important role.
They are. Yeah. I think, and this probably goes back to 6-7 years ago when we had the just the avalanche of people going to sans serif fonts that were, ubiquitous, and the blanding of the world's brands.
Yeah,
and
branding,
I
yeah.
think but I think what was going on at that time was more that, okay, we've got critical dollars that need to be spent to get a message across very quickly. People need to be able to read the name of the company. We may be selling fashion. We don't want to have a logo that's competing with the design of something that we're selling. And that you found that there was a much greater importance to all the folderol that hangs around and supports the context, if you will, that that logo belongs in. So the pattern, the texture, the animation, so on, the sound, so on and so forth, became really much more important. And that logo took a backseat. It became a secondary or tertiary kind of element in the branding system. And what we're starting to see is that people are having, to Jordan's point, the pendulum swinging back, but at the same time, they still recognize the importance of the word mark itself. And for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to use the terms word mark and logo. Word mark representing, that special typographic treatment of the name of the company, and the logo representing if some nugget, some visual symbol that we've created, if that's the case. Mm-hmm. So because we're seeing more word marks, we're also seeing that there's that kind of escapism from that ubiquitous sans serif mark to start to introduce things that are going to be more confrontational, if you will, that people are going to have a greater familiarity with, that are going to have a message that has a little bit more fat and bone to it. So
yeah. And then you had mentioned too, I think this is a perfect example, the looping elements and the things that are there to help a sans serif font become a word mark, right? And
I'm sorry, but I kind of believe they're a cop out to some degree. It's okay, I'll use Angie or Upworks as a couple of examples here.
Angie's a big one on that, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's that everything is, well, in the first place, Angie knocked it down to 4 letters. So it's a pretty succinct little mark, and it's nice. And they've got that little loop on the crossbar on the A. But Upworks is the one that, you've got the straight on U, and then you've got a P that is this kind of loopy kind of P that's in there, and then works is pretty much kosher the rest of the way out. And as you start to think about it, it's kind of like they're saying, okay, well, we want to be relatively conservative, and we're straight-laced guys, and we're going to get you your product, but we have fun. It's kind of mandatory fun, but we know how to do it. And I think I may have made the comment that it's kind of like an MBA graduate is trying to prove to you that they can be spontaneous. Here's my way of showing I'm spontaneous. I'm going to put a letter in there that's got a loop. And, and gosh, the number of entities that have done this, it's just, it was, you are immersed with all of these companies that have done exactly that same thing. Now they've all handled it a little bit differently, a different letter here, or a different type of loop, or some are more exaggerated, some are less, but it's kind of like, I'm going to be pretty much straight-laced on this, but I'm gonna show you a little bit of fun.
Yeah, it's like pretending to take a risk, but you know what I mean? And that goes back to the clients, like, it's not a risk.
So true.
It's like the safest bet you could possibly do, and therefore, like, it kind of falls a little short. I'm in that same camp where you got to know that the design criteria was pretty tight that came from the client on that, and that the designer, let's give them some credit, they probably came back with some much more outlandish stuff that got canned. I mean, I've been that designer a million times. A few times is like, this is the one it's like there's always,
you've had a million jobs. Jordan, you're my okay.
I'll never blame the designer for pretty much anything like that, just because I know how client work is. We all do. Right?
Exactly.
Another one that really kind of surprised me in there, and we've seen this coming, but is the reverse contrast or the reverse stress lettering. And, the one of the best parts about what I get to do when I write these is the research that goes back in behind it. So it's one thing to be able to, find this cluster of logos that you're saying, well, okay, but then I've got to look back and say, well, why is that? Or what's the history on this? Where does this come from? So actually, the William Caslin Type Company in the UK, Caslin, that font that we are familiar with, that family, was actually started back in the early 1700s. that far back. And in 1820, it's kind of like all the fonts that they were creating were like Dido or Bodoni, which had these really strong verticals and these really witty, thin, little, tiny, skinny, horizontals in them. And one of their designers said, and it was almost as a parody, they developed a font called Italian. And this is 1820, Daniel. Look it up, Italian. This particular font is just amazing because what they did was they shoved these big old fat, hairy, horizontals into it and had these spindly little verticals in there. And the thing that we don't recognize is that the public doesn't understand fonts the way we do. Mm-hmm. They just look at it and they go, something's kind of different about that, and it sucks them into it like a vortex, they got a head cocked like a dog. It's just one of those, I don't know what's going on there, but that I think usually the middle of that O is up and down and this thing's sideways. And but all the designers are having so much fun with these. And, the whole idea of shaking the public up and confronting them a little bit with a letter form where, suddenly you flip it 90 degrees, the contrast of it really captures the attention. And I think that Amy and Jen Hood, the Chutzpah girls are doing some really amazing things. If you take a look at the number of fonts that are out there on my font or any of the other font sites, you find that reverse stress or reverse contrast fonts are just blowing up.
Oh, yes.
Out there.
The really reverse italic. I love that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jen and Amy have one in that zone as well. It's kind of you're right. It's that weird spin of familiarity and new.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So here's the 60-year. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Well, I was just going to, expand on like the idea of like fonts really becoming expressive. And I attribute a lot of that to like, it's just easier for people to make a font now. It's way more approachable for any of us to go and make a font, even in Illustrator with like an expansion or something. Like you can.
It's an exceptional point.
Fonts.
Yep.
So yeah, you're just seeing like all of this stuff come through for good and bad, but like it's just cool to see like there's infinite options. You can find any expression you want for fonts now.
There is amongst those reverse stress fonts that we had in there. There was one particular example that was Cocoa, and I don't even know what the company is, COKOWO. But if you take a look at it, the amount of differentiation between the thicks and thins has kind of been brought down, but it's still thicker on top, and thinner on the sides. But it's not so aggressive that you figure it out immediately, and it really captures you. It's kind of like, somebody could bring that particular font home as a date. Dad still didn't like him, but he'd put up with him. And it's one of those that can almost be corporate, but you're finding so much of what was done with reverse stress is, it's going to be for a little bit more outlandish uses.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you're right. All this stuff seems to come from the idea that we got so minimal with things 5 or 6 years ago, and everyone's now just exploring, right? Like, what can we do to be somewhat different? I've noticed some of the fonts and logos that are in some of your trend report reflect this new. I think you have one that's called Morphed or something where it's or Noodle. I can't remember. We'll get to it, but it's the one where everything just looks like the middle was melted, like something. And it's all this all coming from the idea that we got so stripped to Facebook Helvetica, Louis Vuitton Helvetica.
Well, that pendulum, right, from like minimalism to maximalism now.
It's got to come back.
Now, like self-expression rules, like the unconventional choices, because they're creating waves, because we've been in this camp.
And if you want to blow your mind, think of it in this term. That pendulum got over there, but when it started coming back, it freaked you out and it split into 5 different pendulums. So they're all going in different directions out there. But so there we go.
There you go. Well, we're going to get right into it, guys. And sure. This, if you have not seen, is the LogoLounge report for 2022. You can go backwards.
There's the Cocoa logo that you've got right there on top.
There you go. Look at that.
Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Yep.
And I mean, what Pinch is my favorite. I love Pinch. There's just something about it. That one stood out because I'm designing something with that right now. And
I'm glad you said that because I had the damnedest time explaining that one. And I'm not sure I did. You've almost got to look at it and you go, oh, I get it.
You nailed it. I think this might be your best year of naming for sure.
I don't know so good, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So
being able to put names to this stuff, like these trends are everywhere, but like we all say, you know, categorize them differently. But like this is a nice place, like, oh, this is what they're called. Yeah. We have a central place that we can agree on.
So if you haven't got a chance, I really recommend you go through this because some of the takeaways I found here were just so great, Bill, and like what you wrote about the 20 years and this idea of like a logo's got to transcend the trend. The logo's got to transcend the trends. This idea that you could tell if someone has like, you know, just looked at what's at the cream of the crop right or the top of the crop right now, or someone who's done their homework. And you know, I'll be the first to admit it. I have to hear these things because you know it's so easy to fall into these traps sometimes. That like it really inspires everybody to continue to do the best work. And I think that's the whole point here. And here, you know, you got a great little recap of everything there. This is fantastic too, getting into some of the beginnings here and your namings. So you had mentioned a few things. You saw the logo marks, the word marks. You even talked about authenticity and the more important stress of handcrafted and artisanal. It's kind of neat to see where that went, but let's get into that first one here. So
sure. Yeah.
I mean, this one named itself, but wow, bow tie. Yeah. I mean, look at this.
Yeah. So, and keep in mind the new logo for Meta. So it's basically, you know, it's a, here you go. If you guys want to get some extra money and you design one of these, tell your client that it's a limnoscape, which is actually the official name of that little symbol, as opposed to an infinity symbol. They pay more that way. When you know what, I love history and how it kind of works into things. But one of the things that people don't realize is that the Jolly Roger flag that you see, the skull and crossbones in the black field, wasn't really the dominant pirate flag. That every pirate had their own flag. And that one of the elements that was more often than a skull on a flag was an hourglass. So that you would see a flag with an hourglass and it was indicative of your time is up.
Wow.
And that literally was the reason it was on there. So imagine the fear that you get from a skull and crossbones being cast upon your spine because you've seen an hourglass, you know.
There's something inherently cooler about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what a better story in terms of like branding and stuff, like, man.
Yeah. And if you think about what happens if you turn that hourglass 90 degrees, all of a sudden it becomes an infinity symbol. So you've just gone from you're about out of time,
limited time.
You have no time limits whatsoever.
Yeah.
That is
kind of an interesting twist on it.
Yeah.
So really the magic in these is at that juncture point where the two things come together. Mm-hmm. And you can either imagine that almost being a rectangle that's been given a twist, you know, so that you've got that piece coming through there. But it, for a company, expresses this idea that, you know, we've got something that goes through a process, gets refined down, and then it blows back out, you know, or that it's two things coming together, that linkage between them create that greater impact that you have. Or it's a process. If you look at the outside, you know, of it, and you follow it as a path in there, obviously it's infinity, but there's so many things that go on in there. Even if you look at, there's a new car that's out and it's failing me right now. No, actually, I'm not going to let this fail me. I'm just going to scroll back here to it. It's the, it's called Dacia, which is a European car, which has this kind of horizontal, if you will, 2 points kind of coming together. It also represents the D and the C in their name as they come together. But a really interesting little side note, it's on the front of the car in a very unique way because it's an electric car. If you start looking at what is going on with logos and electric cars, we've always seen these badges that were on the center of the car grille.
Yeah.
Electric cars don't need grills.
Yeah.
So seriously, the front of the car is healing over, right? Yeah. And people are looking at it in a different way. So Sony actually has its prototype electric car, and its logo is actually two lines that come together and then they swerve off of each other, kind of like this. Now, that's not a logo.
Yeah.
It just means that, if you look at the steering wheel of it, that, all of a sudden these things come together. Yeah, there you go. There's your Dasha logo down there towards the bottom.
Yeah.
Their new logo that starts to come together.
Wow.
Pretty
Oh,
cool.
I think of tuning fork. I could see so many different things in that, right?
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you can get some visuals on here. This is great.
That's what we're going to be doing today.
Okay, enough time with bow ties.
Let's go on.
UVula, and I'm so glad that, I swear to God, it's unfortunate that it's that close to vulva, because I have too many people that have stopped me and said, really? And I said, it's UVula.
Stop.
So stop. Yeah. So here's the thing that I love about this is that we've seen logos that have had drops in them for years. Drops are nothing new, but if you think about a drop, it takes 480 drops to make a fluid ounce. But it only takes a single drop, a single tear to break a parent's heart. So, a drop can be something huge or it can be something very small. And when you think about what's going on here, these drops have been encased. But the thing I like even more about the encasement representing whatever the topic is. So here we've got, that may be the world's best orange juice or an eye drop up top. Or that one drop coming down into the fire. You don't know if it's going to extinguish the fire or if it's going to ignite it. But the thing I love is that all of these drops are still hanging on to their substance. They're hanging on at the top to where they came from. So it is this thing where we know that that drop is going to drop, but it is caught in time in the logo. And that's the message, is that, this is about to do something. We don't know exactly what, but it's still in process.
Like it's still from the source.
Still coming from the source.
Yeah.
I love
whatever that might be, whatever that might be,
Yep.
It's funny, the flame one, the fire one, what's interesting is if it didn't have that little accent there right in there to drop, it's kind of interesting. Like that's telling you now it's a droplet. Without it, it could just be a kind of a cool flame design.
It could be, and I will tell you that there are some other iterations which weren't included in here. Let me make a real quick pitch, because just today I got an email from LinkedIn Learning, who I'm an author for, and I do the report on LinkedIn Learning every year. It just released today, and there are other logos. Even though I just show 4 in the report, typically in the LinkedIn Learning course, I go into a much deeper dive on all of these, and there's upwards of 20 or more logos with examples of different categorizations within each one of these that you can look at. And by the way, it's an amazing course just on its own.
Oh, wonderful.
I heard the author is stunning, but it's me.
Surprise.
Yeah.
This could really evoke a lot of emotion and almost be custom to the consumer. I think a lot of people would have different interpretations of what this represents to them.
Yeah.
To me, it feels nurturing, and it feels very like I see more of the positive than the negative. I see the
I definitely see positive.
Right, the hugging. Like I know the drop's in there for a reason too, but there's this like nurturing kind of cocoon thing about it that's kind of neat too.
That's a great way to look at it.
It's like I see it as very secure too and unique, but like what a neat way to kind of I always love to pick that part with you, is that idea of like, what is the emotion? What are they trying to do with this one, right? Like that's what I love.
It's more precious.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. All right, let's take a look what we got next.
Rooters.
Another good name, and my God, these are everywhere.
Talk about asking Jordan to cut his arm off and seeing what it looks like inside. Nature gets messy. It does. So here's my thought on this, is that the first thing I think of is it kind of looks like a root system or coral, or the vein structure or our arteries or something like that. But nature is complicated. But as designers, we've got to be able to find a way to express that symbolically that people can understand, and that complicated is good. And a company that understands complicated things but can simplify them down, boy, that's even better. Designers hate to draw trees. They do. I mean, that's the reason that kids, stick a ball on top of a stick, is because that's a tree. And, if you think about it, trees are incredibly complex, just the part above the ground. How do you reduce that down? That's why there's so many pine trees that people draw. But if you take a look at the root structure, a lot of times designers will just turn it upside down and shove that into the ground. The root structure is very complicated, but we need to be able to refine that in such a way that people understand it. And this is interesting because the logo in the upper left and the logo in the lower right both kind of follow a very organized pathway, if you will, that is laid out there, yet it is random.
Yeah.
The one in the upper right and the lower left, you've got good positive, negative spacing going on there, but at the same time, there's kind of randomness to them.
Yeah.
And I think that
the
thing that all of these do is they give us the ability to send a message via the shape that they are created, the letter R, the letter C, the tree. But by looking at the surface as an additional area of information, we're able to add more information into this because we're treating the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's dead on right. Because like at the face of this, they're all simple shapes. Like you have the hex, you have a C, R, circle. So it's like, how do you fill that? Like just beyond just going simple minimalism, fill it with the color. It's like you can add a lot of intricacies in this controlled chaos, which these end up looking like something kind of interesting because you're taking up all that space. They're still balanced, they're still clean, they're still pretty geometric, but like there is that asset of like, this is a bit more randomized. This is a bit more
like one's more uniform, one's a little more chaos.
Yeah.
Like, I love even the difference of the rounded cap and the squared off cap and what a difference it makes. The lower right comes off a little more, it's chill. It's much, you got the cold. Then those other ones, particularly upper right, the C with the rounded lines and caps, friendly, right? Approachable.
Yeah.
Like
cool.
it's,
Nick, I hadn't even picked up on that, but you're right. It does.
That's the stuff that like really, I just love. It's even like lowercase fonts just feel more friendly, right? Uppercase feel a little more trusted and established. So it's these little principles that you could pull out and kind of say like, wow, that's one thing I can just pull from one of these for whatever next project someone's working on,
Completely agree.
Yeah, rooters.
Great
name. All right, here we go. Reverse stress.
We kind of talked about reverse stress a little bit already. I will make the one comment that you'll notice union.
Yeah.
That the kind of Arabic kind of feel to that letter form. The reason that we have strong, thick verticals is that the way a pen would be held if you pull it a traditional fountain pen or
like a calligraphy
or even a calligraphy pen is if you pull down, you have the fat of the blade coming down, and as you cross, the way you hold it, it makes it thin. That's where that comes from. But under their letter forms, they do it just the opposite. So their letter forms are thick running horizontally and thin running vertically. So it's perfectly natural for them to look at a letter form and see this kind of reverse stress.
That's interesting. Okay. Very cool.
What's your opinion, Bill, on like the top? I don't want to even like single one out here, but like, at what degree how does a designer know when to stop and say, I've added the character I want, I added the essence, I want the vibe, but then it could just get to a point where it's unreadable. And can that survive in this world where, it has to be, you said at the very beginning, we're even pulling away from logo marks and getting word marks in there because it has to say the name in a split second, right?
Sure. Yeah. And we're going to even talk when we get down to tight, you're going to end up seeing some stuff that is illegible, that it's cool from a design perspective of a shape, but it's words that are almost illegible. And you've got to make that call. Keep this in mind. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but context is everything. We're looking at these logos basically on, white backgrounds, and they will never exist that way. They're always going to be in a field. They're going to be with other information, with a photo, with other context that is going to help you understand what that industry is. or a line that says right underneath, if you can't read union, there's a line right underneath that says union's provider of the largest, in text. And it's, so, I mean, you always have other information which informs you whenever you look at a mark. It never exists purely on its own.
Perfect. Yep, totally agree. All right, here we go. We got into
loopers. We talked about loopers.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I love the Upwork one. I really do. Like, there's
good.
It, and I'm seeing it the way it's used too. Just keeps that they're pushing a boundary, and I love it. Like and that camp one as well. It's one of my favorites too.
And again, don't blame me for the fact that these are two-dimensional analog static images, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of animation that goes on with these.
True.
There is a lot of personality that's given to them in other ways that you can't read when you just look at an analog, print static version of it.
They do add motion, like, because your eyes follow that loop, like you're immediately putting motion to something that is static. So like, if that's the intention, I think they do kind of do some cool stuff with that, right? Like, like I'm getting an action when I read that. I don't just read it as a static word. I kind of follow that trajectory. And so like, there's something to that, I do like that facet about these things.
It's kind of like one of the letter form just kind of pulled down its pants and mooned you. It's kind of like all of a sudden, I don't want to look at that, but did I really see that?
I can't wait to put that in my next pitch rationale for a client. Look at that A.
Well, it's like
it just pulled its pants down and said, here I am. Well, even the camp one, it feels like you can go right up to it and like it's like springy.
Yeah,
right.
It's fun. It's fun,
and I love that vibe. That to me, those were those successful little moments about when a design is doing something custom to me. That, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that camp one, by the way, is affiliated with a child's product.
Yes.
Or a youthful product. So so again, you've got to think about who these are geared towards.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I'm not saying that any of them are wrong. I'm not trying to pass judgment on these. I'm looking at them as a whole in a category.
Exactly.
But I will say that this was one of those categories where, somebody shoves a letter in there that's, loopy, and it's kind of like everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
All right.
Not the idea.
I might be guilty of this one too. This is called Overarching, and I think we've all seen this. This is a boho inspired, and I love that it's making it to like the top right one, the Thunderworks. Like it's showing up in all forms and all flavors, but pretty big, huh?
Yeah, it's it's a badge, it's a crest. But the thing that we're starting to see here is, and that I kind of like that idea of, we're accustomed to working with lockups as designers, that we've got a logo and we've got a word mark, and they live together. And sometimes the word mark can go out on its own, or sometimes the logo can go out on their own. But these things are married. We've gone in and just taken that word mark and we've draped it over the top of this like a towel on a toilet. It's there, it's connected now. And it's a pairing that you are going to have to deal with when you scale it down. You can only get so small with it, because at a certain point you're not going to be able to read it. Or you can only get so large with it, because at a certain point the letter forms are going to become horsey. It's cool. One of the things I like about this is the fact that the letters have not been massaged. If you look at those, nobody's sitting here kind of trying to stretch out letter forms to try and make it work. It's just, we're just going to take the letters and we're going to space them around this and drape it on top. So,
yeah, that's true. I wonder too, like when you're in your situation where you submit the logo, these to me feel like they could be parts of the logo system, and these are the badges, and it's not maybe the hero lockup like you said at the beginning. Would you ever like specify that in there, or does it even matter? Is in the trend?
Actually, Carnival and Moving Flowers do. So you will find other iterations of those where they aren't draped over the top.
Because I love this as we talk about this so much, not only here, but when I talk with my students, how they can get more money from creating a logo for a small business or something. And this idea of creating a system. You don't want to just
You've got
do
my
one
interest
logo.
now, Nick. Go ahead.
Yeah, you don't want to do just a logo, right? You know it. You're an agency owner. We know these tips, but like to broaden that delivery and say, I'm not just going to give you a logo. I'm going to give you a badge. I'm going to give you the word mark. We're going to give you so many other lockups to do here. So that's why I love seeing these, because it's like it's an added thing to add to that thing that you can bill for.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
really cool. All right, where are you up now?
Whiplash. Hey, Jordan, I mentioned to you that not everything runs in 30-year cycles, and maybe you can prove to me different, but Art Nouveau, this thing's running in a 60-year cycle as best I can tell, but it pulls itself out at just the right moment. Obviously Art Nouveau has this very variable width, line weight, and swishes and swirls, and they literally refer to, if you look at the tail of Louis, for instance, there where that pulls back, that's called a whiplash, or the L in lane. That is the literal name of that, is a whiplash. So that's where that comes from. The General Electric logo that I grew up with in my house all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Those four little elements inside that circle, those are whiplashes, because that logo was originally drafted in 1900. So if you go back to the history of the General Electric logo, and there you go.
Look at that.
You really get this idea of the letter forms in there having this kind of gracious, but that was an homage to nature. It was humanism that was being played in there at the time, and it was highly influential. But then as you move into the 60s, when it's being used with psychedelia and the use of drugs and recreational materials, and so it became that representation at that time of this kind of smoky,
every music festival from like the 60s and the 70s, right? Like,
if you look at all the Bill Graham stuff at Fillmore, all of that utilized that kind of letter form that was going on in there. And even if you take a look at Melted, that's actually for a cannabis product, and that's the reason that we're talking about it in there. Or Papier, which is a manufacturer of journals over in the UK. They're such beautiful journals that even if you didn't know how to write, you'd buy one just because you thought the journal was cool. But I'm finding that these were used in much more laid back kind of colorations. The colors are desaturated. They're usually paired with other fonts that might be a serif font that is more classical in form. So it's kind of like they've still got this spirit of nature. But it's been pulled back.
Yeah, they're really expressive. But this is one in the list I think I've seen just everywhere. You go to like any like creative market, like every font is one of these right now. It's like the hottest trend, at least in type. And I think that's probably why we see a lot of it on type. It works really well. That's sort of from, but man, you
can create some amazing ligatures and pairings of letters with this, kind of look too.
Totally. I love that it's even made it into the logo mark itself here, like on the papier. Like to me, that's one of my favorites. I'm so glad you mentioned the color too, because you're right. They kind of have an antique-y kind of dusty palette in a way. But what's funny is everything you explained about its history and its thing almost sounded rebellious to me, or at least alternative, right? Like, and it's funny that and yet it's like still so, now we look at it and it almost feels classical. Like it's this one's a game changer for me. I love it.
I kind of look at it as right before any of these 60-year points at which this has surfaced, we have been so uptight.
Yes,
serious.
That's it.
We're working in formation, and all of a sudden it's like, for God's sake, let me let my guard down.
Business in front, party in the back. This is the mullet of graphic design right now.
Oh, I love that term. We'll work with that.
This is great. This is that. I'm glad you got it together in a group and named it, because I was even showing this, I remember about 6 months ago, I'm like, what is this called? Because seeing it, like Jordan said, it just blew up. It's like every new font is this zone, and I'm like, I'm afraid to use them
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's like one of the things, like, and that's why, checking LogoLounge or whatever's on the marketplace, like, if it feels like it's becoming really hot, like, it's gonna probably have a date. Like, people in a year from now are gonna like, oh yeah, that's played out, because
Yep.
so much of it is happening right now.
So
Yeah.
it's true and it's not true both.
Yeah.
I mean, because gosh, how many trends have we forecast that end up, branching off into new things, or that
Well,
continue
like
on
that
for
half
some
step,
time?
right?
I can remember when we first started reporting on monoline kind of,
Yeah.
logos, and God, those things hung around forever. And it's just one of those things where some things are gonna stick around, some things
Yeah.
aren't.
Yeah.
I feel like this
yeah.
year, a lot of it is, at least from my perception, these kind of like transitional periods where, like, I don't know if these will be here forever, but I think they're gonna lean into something cool, or like something a little different. Same with like when you get into like the deep eating traps.
Yeah.
I can't get on board with that trend, but like I think it's starting to get maybe somewhere cool. Maybe we're in the half step of like,
There you go.
or application, more wide spread.
The thing you've got to do, Jordan, is, and I make this comment often when I talk to people, that the leader of a parade
Yeah,
is only a couple of steps ahead of everybody else.
sure.
If you're a mile ahead of everybody else, they can't see you and they're not going to follow you. So all you've got to do is get just a little ahead to lead. And when you are thinking about, when you are looking at these, don't think about, gosh, am I still going to see this group of 4 next year? No.
Oh
What
yeah,
you're going to
sure.
do is you're thinking, okay, what do I get out of this? I get the fact that all of these are starting to work with some pretty variable line weight, that there's this fluidity to it. So how do I carry variable and fluidity? Is that a word? Fluidness, forward with this.
Yeah.
What do I start? How do I use that line? And maybe the mounting, fluid lines in papier is a clue here. Maybe you start to see more of those. Maybe as we get to Ray, which is coming up here, you start to see a combination of these lines that are in Ray very straight, with lines that have this curvaceous feel to them.
Oh, totally. Well, and I think even taking the bigger step back, like especially when we go through this stuff, it is never like, let's look at these logos and figure out how they translate. Or like this encompassing thing, it seems like we're just taking a bigger step into self-expression this year. And I think that's where the pendulum, like I'm talking like a single pendulum, where is it starting to go? And it just seems like we're getting away from the minimalism, a little bit further away from perfect geometric, and finding even little bits and maybe lots of bits of just like, can it get more expressive? Can we find that like, that bit of counter culture decisions to design in order to like break off to something new? Because it never goes back.
Completely correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely inspiring. It's like everyone's out of the box a little bit,
Well, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Hand dots. Oh my!
Wow, this was a surprise one for me. I guess you're talking more about like the stippling, right? Like the stippling effect, and we've seen it's like a big halftone.
Well, so here's the deal: humans are flawed, and that's a sales feature. It is. This is going back to your comment about things are artisanal, things that are handmade.
Oh yeah.
And it really is. I mean, you aren't going to see this on the front of a Tesla. This is we're talking about something that I feel comfortable with rugs being handmade, or mugs,
tacos,
or chocolates, tacos. I'm good with that. You give me a handmade windshield wiper or chainsaw, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. So, but when you think about who these are representing, you want for there to be that handmade quality to it. And the introduction of that halftone in there, or that stippling in there, yes, they could have gone to a kit and pulled out, a halftone and drop that on there. And some of them do.
Yeah.
But the fact that you think about every one of those dots was purposely misplaced on there.
Random.
By hand, to prove to you that we are flawed. It is, and it represents that. And it, like I say, it could easily be a halftone that they dropped on there.
Yeah.
But that doesn't jive with the illustration style or the product.
Yeah. And
Totally.
it could work. I love like the Taco one obviously has probably the best in scalability just because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
of the size of it compared to the shape and size of the logo. But some of the other
Sure.
ones I think too, even in scalability, will create a bit of the still authentic vibe, even if the dots aren't coming through. It's almost shade now, or like what a
Yeah.
halftone really does. And
You just nailed it. It's
that's
a
so
halftone.
cool. I love
It's a handmade
this
halftone.
trick.
Mhm.
This is like a magic trick. I love it. All right, next one up. Super traps. Yeah, now that wow. Another big
Yeah.
trend.
It
Yeah.
shows my generation. It was based on Supertramp, but okay, I'll go with Super Traps. Yeah. So Centennial, Bell Centennial, the font was developed because when they printed phone books on the world's cheapest paper, and by the way, you're going to have a section where you explain to people what a phone book is. But the type was in like 4-point or 5-point or whatever. Think how quickly the ink would start to swell and trap inside of, say, a capital letter M. You've got these things coming down to these negative points. And when you start to think about that, and you got a home weigh in on Bell Centennial, it was a font that was actually created with these little traps in it.
There you go.
Just so that when the paper sucked the ink into the corner, it would complete the letter form. I mean, that was the purpose for it. Now, I'm going to totally blow your mind because now we are making fonts that have what are called light traps. Because digitally, when you show a font on a screen, you have this issue of the glaring light in a spot doesn't render the letter the way you want to. So you misshape the letter in order to accommodate. Yeah, if you zoom way in on that letter N on, there you go.
There you go.
You can see what's going on in Bell Centennial. And that was why it was designed that way. Now, as a group of designers that are no longer dealing with print, and a lot of designers, they came and looked at this and they're, holy shit, this is great. Look at this letter. Do you see this thing? And you blow it up and people are just captivated by it. And the Brisbane logo, that B&E, you damn well know that the designer didn't have that good of an explanation. It wasn't like, these are a couple of slips you can pull your ship into.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't know what this was, but it was cool. And I think that it starts to convey a techie feel. That AR2, I love the fact that you've got this really low X height on AR2 and that it opens up those little traps in there. So and I mentioned this. There's a phrase that stops me in my tracks: unintended consequences. I love that phrase because that unintended consequences, you don't know the outcome or if the protagonist lives or not, but you know that there's a good finish to this story.
Yeah.
And there are some of these trends in here which I consider unintended consequences. Bell Centennial had no idea that 60
one day
years later people were going to go, I love this. This is so cool. Yeah.
Hey, I love it. I love the source of this because I'm seeing it so often, and I just thought again it was some random designer thing, and it's neat to see that it came from the need in the print world.
Mm-hmm.
Just incredible. Yeah.
Crazy.
Love it.
Crazy.
Here we go. All right. My favorite for sure.
Why is that one your favorite?
I'm a big fan of this style of old airlines and I don't know what, I never know how to describe it. It's kind of the base. Even old car ornaments and that idea of things seem streamlined. Like these have a way of looking like they were put into some aerodynamic, like wind created it. Like the pressure of like wind pinched in these little areas. And I think there's something supportive and very then there's the wing vibe to a lot of these as well. But this is a favorite style of mine. And when I saw these, I was like, the Kion. That could be one of my favorite logos of all time right there.
Yeah, it is really beautiful the way it's crafted. I mean, it just really hangs together. So as I'm going to tell you a secret, and maybe this is going to get out there and it's going to cause me harm eventually with people coming in to show me their portfolio. But I can look at somebody's portfolio in a matter of seconds and tell whether or not they've got it. And one of the things that just peeves me to no end is when somebody does a series of concentric lines that are arced at the corner, that they haven't figured out how to deal with the inside and outside radius of those lines. That's probably a hard description of what I've just said. But when you see a designer that gets it and understands that the negative space needs to have equal width to the positive space in there, then they've figured it out. These take another step in a different direction. And I used to do maintenance from my father's apartments when I was growing up, and I've done my share of plumbing. And if you've ever picked up a piece of copper tubing and tried to, curve it, which is necessary, that feeling when you push it too hard and it pinches and you go, ah, because you've just destroyed it. You can't, once you, bend it, you can't. And that's what this looks like to me, right there. Is that little pinch in that pipe, that
exactly what it looks like.
But how beautiful is this when you start to look at the repetition of the one in the upper right-hand corner, of those little negative space triangles that are pushing in there. And notice that inside corner doesn't push into a arc on those, but that one's actually, a 45-degree angle in there, which is eased on the edges. Yeah. But as opposed to the Kion with the letter K, or the one in the upper left-hand corner where it does arc in there. But people are starting to figure this out, and it just has a really beautiful, just comfortable feel to it.
Yeah. You're right. It's a combination of like a thick and thin font that might be serifed, and then a non-serif font that is all uniform. So you're playing in a world that I feel like sometimes feels new and fresh to me. Like that's maybe what I think I like about this the most is
Can you pop onto brand new?
Yeah.
Do you have that open? Pop in there, because if you look at today, you'll find, there you go. You'll find that there was a logo that was recorded on there just today.
Yeah, right here?
If you pull it up.
Saw it earlier today.
Yep. And
beautiful.
Home in on the letter form there. Matter of fact, go on down and you'll get the full letter form here.
There it is.
There you go. Pinched.
Wow. Just so, oh my gosh, this is like Jetsons meets SpaceX meets.
Isn't that really tasty?
I love it. I love it.
Just a really good feel to it, and you're going to see more and more of it, and every designer is going to find an interesting way to try and integrate this into their work.
Yeah, considering what they came from, I mean, wow. I mean, sometimes when you just see these successful little rebrands on brand new, oh gosh, just crazy. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, the previous logo, I did that in one night. I didn't have a lot of time. No, I'm kidding. I didn't.
I know. You got to be careful about talking about old brands, man.
Yeah, I hate that logo. Well, I really didn't have a lot of time on it. I was just jacking away. Verarray. I will tell you that one of my favorite designer friends, his name is Tamara Chibukiani, and she's with Pragmatica. And I may have even mentioned her in there. She's been a judge in the past on our LogoLounge books, but she is the one that designed the logo in the upper right-hand corner. And she just really does some amazing work. And most of these have a single point from which lines radiate. But hers, she pulls them together. No, you're fine. From various points. I love lily pad. Now, so let me point out to people what they should be looking for here. It isn't the fact that these are halo or radius logos. What's going on here is you'll notice that a single line steps in gradient. So a thin line suddenly steps up and becomes fatter. But the way that it's used, it creates a layering in here. So if you look at that round logo in the upper left-hand corner, those are all, it's all a series of lines coming out from that almond shape in the middle. Yet the thing that creates that dimensionality is that shift in weight at a certain point. So there's your dimension. If you look at lily pad, and this is the other thing I like about these is, a few years back, all of these were just circles. And now we're exploring other shapes with this. We're starting to see, and really these things are so hypnotizing. They just kind of mesmerize you and suck you into them because you've got all of this layer. And the really beautiful thing that I think a lot of people don't understand about these is the negative space in these is almost equal to the positive space. So it really attaches itself and gives a sense of place to the page or whatever it is on. Yeah. And it, combines the two together.
I'm sure every designer looks at this sometimes and be like, okay, how in the world would I build this? Like, trying to figure like the geometry of it and the math of it. It's just, it has that piano key kind of thing going with the thick stroke and thin strokes becoming this beautiful unity together. Really nice. Really
adding
nice.
those dimensions, right? The shadows and highlights.
I know. All right. Next up we have is called Tight.
Tight. So I started out with, and it helped that one of the logos actually said tight. So as I started going through things, I noticed that there were a lot of, and there were a lot of highly condensed fonts, mostly sans serif, that were just really tall, timber-sized structures, kind of sequoia type fonts. And it was so tall. And then I started realizing a lot of them were really close together. And if you start to take a look at these, if that Kobe, which I think is really fun.
Oh, yeah.
If I try and scale that thing down, it's not going to be legible. Okay. It's got a certain size that you need to keep it at to function. It's the same with a few of these others in here where you've got to watch your scaling, but outside of that, they're kind of puzzles.
Yeah, that's true.
It's spatial. Gosh, can I take a square and can I fit Kobe into it? Can I, I think they almost work better for a little monogram logo like the G or a single letter or something like that, maybe where you don't have to read them. But then again, maybe they're, eye bait, they suck you in because you want to be able to read it.
Yeah. These scare me.
The style a bit more like I do a lot of packaging, especially in like your beverage world, and a lot of it's just like a big ass name on a can sideways now. And so I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of this stuff where to take up more real estate, let's just take up all the real estate,
including the space between each letter.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, that one scares me because I know I can appreciate it when I see it done well like these. I know when I've tried it, maybe I don't know if it's just the eye of the designer that doesn't like it, but maybe it's okay. You know what I mean? It's like one of those ones I'm really scared to try, but these are pretty successful. I think they...
And Jordan, going back, because Jordan was talking earlier about this idea of the 30-year trend, this is really going back to a lot of the fonts in the 70s, a lot of the fonts in the 80s, and even dragging into the 90s where there were, a lot of display fonts that were done. If you think about Milton Glazer's work on the Dylan poster, that was his use of baby teeth, which was a font in there that had this really tight little line work inside of it. And it worked out there because the letter forms himself described the letters, the negative space wasn't essential to being able to read the letter form.
There you go.
Yeah.
Here it's a bit more challenging.
Yeah. All right, let's see what we got next. Almonds. Almonds are back. I love it.
Back. So here's what surprised me. So we both know that if you take the MasterCard logo and you've got these two intersecting balls, two equal sized circles, and they overlap, that they create the shape in the middle. And I was just floored by the fact that there really isn't a good name for that shape. It is either Viscopiscus, which is Latin for a fish's bladder, because apparently there's a fish, there's a way that the fish's bladder kind of forms that sac in between. I'm going, okay, no, I'm not going there. And, or mandorla, which is Italian for almond. And I thought, screw it, it's going to be almond. And every year there is a question of me, which is what's the shape of the year? And this year it was almonds and macaroni. And we'll get to macaroni, but almonds is just a,
so
what a
versatile
representation
too.
of nature. You know, it's
so versatile.
It's a leaf, it's a feather, it's an eye. You know, it's a fish. It's, you know, it's all of these things, and you know, it is highly versatile. And sometimes it's a star, and sometimes it's a supporting character. But you know, all over the place.
And I love the ones that where they're made up of only those. It's just a series of them constructing a logo, right? It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. All right,
Trellis.
These are beautiful. Yeah, I love this.
You know, we talked earlier about this idea of dealing with the surface of something, but the shape is going to give. If I look at that fleur-de-lis in the lower right, you know, I can look at fleur-de-lis and I can go, okay, it's French, it is royal, it is an iris, it is, you know, all these things that we know a fleur-de-lis represent. But if you take the surface of it, and they've obviously in this played out the idea of nature. So, I mean, it literally is this trellis of vines and stuff, but it really is more about that idea of taking something that is not organic or not botanical and creating this botanic out of it, you know, in some way. And, you know, the monkey, the one that Kyle Courtright did on there with a couple of leaves on its tail, you know, okay, I get the idea. It's nature. Or is it the lion? It's nature, because we can turn up the volume or we can turn down the volume, you know, with the scale at which we introduce things or the power with which it sits inside of that shape.
Beautiful. Love that. This one is a favorite as well. Love that one as well. All right. I think this is
last one.
There we go. Macaroni. I'm getting hungry. I'm getting really hungry.
We're almost there. So the macaroni, I kid people about the fact that my mom used to buy the cheap stuff. So I'm not sure it was a craft, but it was only the quarter macaronis as opposed to the half macaronis, you know.
Couldn't even afford the half.
Couldn't afford the half. Went for the quarter. But I also kid that I'm relatively sure that most of the art directors that came up with these or designers were spending time during COVID doing macaroni craft projects with their kids where they were gluing pasta down on sheets and going,
there's an icon.
That would work. Hang on a second. I can bill for this time.
Yeah. Very true. Man, I love that jellyfish one. I think that to me is kind of fun. Really fun. I think, again, it's like almond. I've seen a lot of logos just made of a series of the same icon. And again, I think it has different meaning for everybody. It's really, really something. Man, we went through all of them, man.
You went through all this, and I know I ran you way over that.
No, but I think
hope it was
the fact that we're keeping this visual and it's all about logos, I mean, I don't think there's anything all of us and our listeners want to talk about more, you know?
Totally.
This is great,
okay,
man.
So this is my pitch.
Yes, go for it.
LogoLounge, there are 380,000 some logos that have been submitted by more than 20,000 members around the world. These things are so highly contextualized. It's $100 a year. If you are going to spend money to utilize some kind of a resource, this is a double bang, because one, you can go into LogoLounge and you can search by industry or keyword or designer or the type of logo or the quality of the logo, or there's so many ways that you can search and pull together the resources that you need to have that inspiration. But, and as Nick well knows, because he's been published in our books, you can also submit everything that you want to into the LogoLounge resource. And that every year we do the LogoLounge books, every actually year and a half. We're on book number 13 right now, so you could well be published inside of one of these books. Those books are selected, the content, by a group of 10 internationally recognized jurors, design-wise, that pull out the very best of. And it is a radiating thing to be selected and included in that book, again, as Nick could attest. So, you know, that's, by the way, my daughter is getting married this year, and I've got to fund the wedding. So if you buy,
do it for love, y'all.
Do it for the sake of love.
LogoLounge account, as I'm sitting there eating a piece of wedding cake, I'll be thinking.
Yeah, it really is like that invaluable place. Just because I look at I know every single designer, where do you start from, right? You have a creative brief, and then you start getting into like what's going on out there. You start researching, Googling, dribbling, whatever it is. But like It is. There's no other place that has like that singular database, and I think that's where it
Yeah.
shines, right? Like,
Yeah,
that kind of stuff is
It's
just
pretty amazing.
so valuable.
that's really great.
It's
That's
huge.
It has
man.
inspired a lot of people, and it's been a tremendous resource for them. So we want to
Yeah.
continue that on.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Bill, thank you so much for doing this again, as always.
You're
we
welcome.
we love doing it. It looks like it's getting dark where you are. Not too bad.
Oh, yeah, it's not too bad. We're what time is it? Yeah. Well, it's whatever time somebody is listening to this, isn't it?
There you go. Always appreciate you doing this. And one day I'd love to, we keep saying this, I think, but like, I want to get you in mid-year and talk more about the pitch of
Please.
a logo. And that to me, I think is something we all want to talk about a lot more. And that whole idea of like, we dig so deep into this and the trends. Now, how do we take it? How do you build that rationale into your pitch and really make the client confident with what you're showing? That would be a really great one to dig deep with you on. All right.
I'm there.
Thank you so
All
much. All right, Bill. Well, thanks again so much. Great report. And
Absolutely.
we'll talk
Thank
to you
you
all
so
later.
much. Okay. Bye, guys.